Okay, Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. Anybody?
Morning, sir.
Okay, at least someone
Waalaikumsalam, morning, sir.
hears me. Okay, so thank you. Okay, thank you and welcome to BMM 4253 Continuum Solid Mechanics. So this is the first time this subject will be offered this semester, and for those who have taken CMBE BMM 4863. So this subject is completely different from CMBE, okay? And for today, I will introduce to you about the course and a little bit about the introduction about the subject, okay? So let's go to the course introduction. So it's a BMM 4253 Continuum Solid Mechanics, and it's a 3 credit hour. And I think the prerequisite is actually advanced strength materials or SOM 2. I actually don't know your previous course structure. Okay, so the latest course structure is advanced SOM. I think similar to SOM 2. So to acquire SOM 2, you have to have SOM 1 and also material science. So that's why the prerequisite, there are 3 subjects. Okay. So what is this course? So this course introduces the modeling of mechanical behavior of materials using continuum mass rather than discrete particles. So later on, I will explain more what is continuum mass, what is discrete particles. And then the content of the course includes the introduction to tensor notation, kinematics of continuum, deformation and strain, stress tensor, and linear and non-linear constitutive materials, constitutive equation for materials. And also in this subject, I will introduce to you some MATLAB functionality and how to use MATLAB to solve some of the continuum mechanics problem. So there are 4 course outcomes. So first one is you will be able to apply tensor and matrix algebra. So in Cartesian or curvilinear coordinate. Course outcome number 2, you will be analyze the motion, deformation, and stresses of a given continuum mechanics problems. And course outcome number 3, you will be evaluate the constitutive equation of materials. And lastly, to investigate the stress and deformation of a material. Okay, so this is related to your program outcome. And so the assessment for this subject, we have 20% for project. Project later on I will give to you maybe before midterm, okay, tak buat lagi. And then we have a midterm exam, 20%, and 60% final exam. So the exam will be open book. So in case tiba-tiba kena face to face exam, we don't know kan. So it's an open book, don't worry. Okay. And in this course, we will learn 5 chapters. So the first one is about the introduction to continuum mechanics. And second chapter is about maybe refresh your brain, okay, related to vector, maybe belajar masa form 4 or form 5. And tensor. So tensor is basically similar to matrix, okay. So refresh your memory on matrix. And then after we learn about this, then we can understand the kinematics of continuum mechanics and also stress tensor or stress matrix, and then apply the constitutive equations for material. And these are the reference. So the references, I think I've put some of the PDF books in Kalam. Okay, so you can download, or you can search for other references. So references is basically used for doing exercise. Okay, so dalam buku selalunya ada exercise dan mungkin ada jawapan juga. So you can explore the exercise yourself later. Okay, so let me bring you to our Kalam. So in Kalam, I've put the course introduction, COPO, and the assessment. And in the resources, I've put a folder that contains some books, okay? 5 buku that you can later, maybe starting next week and onwards, you can look at the exercise. Some of the exercise ada jawapan, some tak ada jawapan, okay? And some of the questions are taken from the books, okay? So if you do the exercise, maybe keluar exam, so okay lah. And I also put a simple midterm exam because this is a first time subject. So I put a sample midterm exam, okay? So you can look at this midterm exam question. If you think soalan dia macam boleh mati je, bolehlah drop. Sebab dah ramai orang dalam kelas ni tiba. Okay, so any question before we go to lecture 1, Introduction to Continuum Mechanics? Okay, so in this class, I want you to, it's better if you can ready a pen and paper, because later on, maybe starting next week, there will be a lot of macam exercise or examples. So I think it's better if you can try the exercise first, and then later I discuss the answer, how to answer the question. And also if you can ready your calculator. So if you have calculator, you can get your calculator ready, because most of the question will involve matrix. Okay? So kita tak naklah buat calculation manual pakai matrix, like contohnya nak inverse matrix doing manually, which will take forever untuk inverse a matrix. So if you can use calculator to inverse a matrix, that will be much easier. Okay, so kalau exam kita SEM ni online, so you can always use symbol lab ke untuk inverse matrix, or MATLAB ke. But if our exam, let's say suddenly face to face, then you can use calculator to inverse matrix. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the introduction to this subject, lecture 1, Introduction to Continuum Mechanics. Okay, so lecture 1 is about Introduction to Continuum Mechanics. So at the end of this lecture, you will be able to understand the basic concept about continuum mechanics, why we need to learn about continuum mechanics, and also familiarize yourself with some basic vector metrics. Okay, so when we talk about continuum body, so we assume that the body is continuous. Continuous means that if you look at this picture here on the left, the body is continuous. We cannot see any voids or any ruang-ruang rongga within this materials. But if we zoom the material, maybe using microscope, then we can see that actually the material is made up of a lot of particles yang interacted with each other. Okay, so usually in mechanics, we can model the material as a continuum body, or dalam bahasa Melayu kita panggil jasad yang selanjar atau jasad yang bersambungan. Okay. So we don't use particles because it is difficult to investigate the interaction between each of these particles. Sebab setiap particles ni mestilah ada forces between each other. So it will take much more, if you use computer, much more computer resource to model particles rather than model a continuum body. So at microscopic scale, the matter is discontinuous. So microscopic scale means that at a very small scale, so the matter is discontinuous. Discontinuous means dia tak bersambung. Okay? So this is made up of molecules, atoms, or if we zoom further, we can see that each particles is made up of electrons, protons, quarks, example, and etc. But in daily life, we don't want to know the interaction between these particles. Usually we don't want to know, but in a more fundamental physics research, maybe this is of interest. So if we don't want to know this, we can assume that the matter is made up of something continuous, or we look at material at a larger scale rather than at particle scale. So therefore, we are not concerned with the motion of these atoms or molecules, but we take the behavior, okay, or the average behavior of all of the particles and represent this for the continuum materials, okay. So continuum mechanics is concerned with the mechanical behavior of solids and fluids at macroscopic scale. Macroscopic maksudnya skala yang lebih besar. So kita tengok for example balls, a bola. Kita nampak bola itu adalah pada skala yang besar. But if you zoom at the bola, you might see the interaction between atoms to make sure that the bola is in spherical shape. Okay, but we don't want to look at the zoom state or microscopic state. Okay, we look at the macroscopic scale. So we can treat material as a uniformly distributed material that is throughout the space, okay, distributed throughout space, and we can ignore the discrete nature of matter. Maksudnya kita tak payah consider the particles in terms of atoms, electrons, and so on. So it is possible to define quantities such as density, displacement, velocity, and so on. Maybe we can use functions, for example. So in statics or dynamics, you have learned about rigid body, a body that the shape is maintained and does not change. Okay, the shape is maintained if you apply any force on the rigid body. But in continuum mechanics, we consider these two things, okay, rigid and also deformable bodies. So we know that a body can be deformed, macam plasticine, tanah liat. So if you throw tanah liat ke dinding, then dia akan tertepek, okay, maksudnya dia berubah bentuk. So in rigid body, the particles making up a rigid body, ideally, secara idealnya, will stick to each other. Okay, so if you try to change the shape of rigid body, it's very hard. Okay, meaning that the particle will try to stay in the same location and in same distance between each other. So the relative motion between each particle, maksudnya particle A bergerak berbanding particle B, is almost zero, meaning that the particle will stay seragam with each other. Okay. So in a deformable body or jasad yang boleh terubah bentuk, it has the ability to change in shape. So when a body change in shape, meaning that the particles now is not stay constant in constant distance between each other, meaning that dia punya distance boleh berubah-ubah. And so in a deformable body, the particles motion are very important. So it's important to understand the motion of the particles. But we don't study the particles, each of the particles. Rather, we assume that the body is as a one, as a uniform body. And so we can define the kinetics of the motion. So if you look at this figure here, so figure on the right, the rod is a rigid rod. So dia tak akan bengkok lah, meaning that dia tak akan berubah in shape. But the figure on the left, the rod is a deformable rod, meaning that dia boleh meleding. Okay, so bila dia meleding, then the particles actually, if you zoom using microscope, then the particles in between dalam rod ni, dia sebenarnya berubah distance, okay, berubah size dan distance. So in continuum, we have equations, which later on kita akan belajar lah equations tu. Dia bunyi equation dia nampak macam tak apa-apa lah. Okay, so there are two types of equations. Okay, so first is equation related to conservation of mass and energy. So I think the word conservation of mass and energy, you have encountered this dalam subjek macam thermo, fluid dynamics. So in solid mechanics, in continuum solid mechanics also we use similar conservation equation, okay? Conservation of mass and energy. And then another equation is the equations that describe the mechanical behavior of a material. So in SOM, you have learned about linear elastic material, for example. Tak sure viscoelastic belajar tak. So this elastic and viscoelastic material basically describe the behavior of the material. Macam mana material to behave under certain stress and strain. Okay, so these two equation later on we will see macam mana dia terhasil and how to use these equations. So in this course kita akan guna a lot of vector and matrices or linear algebra and a bit of calculus to solve some problems related to continuum mechanics. So that's why you need your calculator. Okay, similar to subject like FEM. So in FEM you have a matrix, but FEM punya matrix sangat besar lah. So in continuum mechanics, matrix dia usually end up 4x4 je, paling banyak pun. Okay, so you need to use calculator to invert some of these matrices. Okay, so that's it about the introduction. So I want to test your understanding about your maths, okay? Maths zaman SPM dulu, kalau still ingat. So if you have a pen and paper in front of you, bolehlah kita cuba sama-sama untuk tengok ingat lagi tak maths yang simple-simple dulu belajar, okay? Bukanlah maths yang advance, okay? So get ready on your pen and paper. Let's try refresh your maths knowledge. Okay. Okay, so let's test your vector knowledge. Okay, so let's say you are given these three vector: vector A color merah, and vector B color hijau. So the question is, can you find the vector AC? So can you do it? And anybody try answer lah, okay? Kita buat kelas ni tak bosan. Okay, dah ada jawapan? Okay, anybody yang tahu benda ni? Mael ke tiba? A tambah B. Ya, betul. Okay, simple je. Okay. So AC is actually equals kalau kita if you still remember form 4 punya at maths kot. So AC kalau tak tahu AC. So you can write AC equals AO plus OC. Okay, ni derive je lah, okay. But tak payah derive pun tak apa. Okay, AO plus OC. So we can terbalikkan AO ni. So it becomes apalah bodoh sangat. Bukan AO. Okay. AB plus BC. Okay. So AC equals AB plus BC. So dapatlah A plus B. Okay, simple je. Okay, so if you know this concept, okay lah. Maksudnya boleh lah proceed kelas ni. Kalau yang ni pun tak tahu, boleh lah ambil subjek lain. Okay. Later on in next week lecture, kita akan tengok macam mana nak guna vectors and then buat calculation vector yang pernah belajar dulu masa matrix ke, masa diploma ke, masa SPM. Okay, like cross product, dot product, matrix, vector addition, vector subtraction and so on. Okay. Okay, so let's look at a second question. So related to function, so can you find the inverse of fx equals 5x plus 3? So inverse maksudnya kita nak cari f minus 1, okay? F minus 1 x. Boleh tak cari inverse of f? Mungkin ni susah sikit kot. Panggil random lah. Mana tadi? Adli kan nak register subjek ni. Ada jawapan?
X minus 3 over 5.
X minus 3 over 5?
Uh-uh.
Okay, so maksudnya otak awak masih function lah untuk soalan macam ni. Okay, so if we want to do this dalam paper, we can assume let y equals fx. Okay, ni zaman form 4 chapter 1. Okay, so y equals 5x plus 3. So x equals y minus 3 over 5. So the inverse is x minus 3 over 5. Okay. So later on kita akan inversekan some functions, especially function yang nak describe motion. Okay. Contohnya motion dari time 0 to time t, for example. So kita nak inversekan balik, contohnya kita ada motion at time t. So kita nak cari titik asal dia balik. Maksudnya jasad tu dalam keadaan asal dia macam mana. So untuk cari macam tu kita kena inverse the motion. Okay? So nak inverse the motion, kita taklah inverse this function, kita akan inverse a matrix. Okay? So inverse a matrix yang ada function. So kalau guna calculator, it will be susah lah sikit sebab kita ada function dalam matrix. So dalam calculator kita boleh inverse nombor saja. Tapi most of the question will be yang senang nak inverse lah. Tak adalah suddenly ada equation yang nak kena guna calculus yang gila punya. Tak ada. Okay. So if you know this, then you are still your brain is still working. Okay. So nak kan pagi-pagi belajar maths, rasa macam minum kopi. Okay. Okay, so can you use calculator to find the inverse of matrix A? Tak guna calculator pun, nak guna manual pun boleh. Ni soalan senang dan nak kira susah tu je. Nak kira jalan dia panjang. Okay, but we can use calculator. Okay. Okay, kita petik nama lah. Siapa lagi yang nak manual tiba? Soliudin. Dah berjaya inverse. Okay, if you have calculator dekat tangan korang, so I'm using calculator Casio FX 570ES. I think calculator yang lain pun boleh juga. So in this calculator, you can so what I'm doing is I click mode, and then dalam mode ada matrix. Okay, if you press number 6, you have matrix. So in other calculator, you can find matrix. So in matrix, you can define matrix. Dia boleh pilih matrix A, matrix B, or matrix C. So let's say I'm choosing define matrix A, and then choose the size. Okay, so size dia 3 by 3. So size dia 3 by 3. So you just fill in the matrix with the matrix given in the question. Okay. So 1, 0, negatif 2, 3, 1, negatif 2, negatif 5, negatif 1, 9. And then after you fill in, then just turn on, tutup, and then shift. Kalau dekat calculator saya, dia ada satu dekat button number 4, dia ada tulis matrix. Okay. So you just press shift and click button number 4. So if your calculator is different, if you can find the word matrix in your calculator, just press shift that button lah. And then after that, you can choose matrix A. Okay. So bila keluar matrix A dalam calculator, so just write matrix A power of -1. Okay. Atau inversekan dia. So calculator tu akan bagi jawapan inverse matrix lah. So later on I will give you links to YouTube macam mana nak guna calculator untuk find the inverse. So in this subject we will inverse matrix, a lot of matrix, and I don't expect you to do manual calculation of the inverse. If you can use calculator, use calculator. So if you don't know how to use calculator, so you have to learn how to use calculator to inverse matrix. Okay. So dalam calculator kita bukan saja boleh inverse, kita boleh cari dia punya determinant, kita boleh cari dia punya transpose just swap je, okay? Swap location je. And I think you can find matrix power, if I'm not mistaken, matrix power. So like a squared, for example, or a cube, for example. So in our lecture later, or in exam, mostly about inversing the matrix. Okay. So as I said, I don't expect you to do manual calculation of the inverse because it takes half pages, okay, untuk inverse dia. So just press calculator, inverse, you get the answer. Okay, so I think the last question is about differentiation. So can you find y prime for this y function? Okay, so to differentiate this, you just get y prime. So yang ni tahu kod, okay, 12x squared. Okay, so just bawa turun 3 and then kurangkan power dia by 1. So exponent remains the same, and then cosine it becomes negative sign. Okay, so in our lecture, in our class later, kita akan differentiate this kind of function. Okay, function yang simple, dia tak adalah function x, ex ke, ada kot maybe one hard question. Okay, so in exam later, what I will do is let's say in midterm 20% marks, 40 marks in exam. Maybe 30 soalan, 30 markah soalan yang boleh dapat markah, and then 10 markah soalan yang siapa yang bijaksana boleh dapat macam tu. So it's 30 it's 1:4 ratio macam tu lah kot. Okay, satu soalan tu susah sikit nak jawab. Okay, so final pun macam tu. Mungkin ada 8 soalan dalam final. 2 soalan susah nak jawab. The remaining is still answerable if you have lecture note or have done tutorial ke ataupun example exercise ke. Okay, so that's it about our class. Any question before I end this lecture?
No, sir, no.
Okay, so bagus, tak ada soalan. Okay, ada soalan? Okay, so so if you have no question, I just want to remind you to get MATLAB. Maybe week 3 kita akan try MATLAB sikit-sikit. Maybe do some basic tutorial dalam MATLAB. Maybe the project I will give you maybe just before midterm break, okay? So that you can try Mas Cuti, and then throughout the rest of second half of the semester. And please, if you don't have calculator, please get your calculator. Just in case tiba-tiba exam face to face, I don't know, okay? And if you don't know how to do this question that I give to you, bolehlah refresh balik. Okay? If you are not fancy of this kind of things, boleh drop, saya tak kisah, okay? Tiba. Okay, so that's it for my class. See you again next Thursday, insyaAllah. Tuesday next week tak ada kelas, okay? Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Doktor nak tanya.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Ya boleh nak tanya.
Nanti kan doktor record kan kelas kan, nanti doktor upload balik
Nanti saya upload dekat YouTube, saya bagi link dekat dalam group WhatsApp.
Alright, thank you.
Alright, thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
Kira